Anyway, I woke up with a splitting headache. Went out for a call of nature and saw Orion in the sky, beautiful sight. And I said to Jürgen, I'm afraid there's no way I'm going to climb that mountain. I'm just going to go back, take some aspirin and go back to bed. So he did it on his own. And then when I woke up, luckily without the headache, I said, well, if Dirac says he doesn't believe in space-time, what is time?
Dr. Julian Barbour, it's a true honor to be able to speak with you. For people that maybe aren't familiar with you and your work, what's the most important context for the listener to understand?
Goodness me. Two main questions that have always occupied me. One is, what is time? How do we describe the fact that we experience time? Time is the noun time is the word that occurs most frequently in written English.
Really?
But it's the most elusive concept of all. And on top of that, the other thing which has been a main subject of interest for me has been how do we define position? How do we know where we are? What do you mean by both of those things? And I got into thinking about that back in 1963, and I'm still working on those issues.
Incredible. Just amazing. I was reading that you translated Russian documents for 28 years. If you'd believe me, that's exactly how long I've been on this planet as of about 2 weeks ago. I'm 28 years old. So I'm trying to wrap my head around doing something like that for 28 years so that you can fund your physics research on the side. What's your relationship with physics? Tell me about how it's driven your life. Is it a spiritual calling? Like, what's your relationship with it to do that for so long to fund your science?
Well, the starting thing was from about the age of 10. I wanted to become an astronomer. As a little boy, I was very keen on flowers, and I wanted to learn about these flowers that you can call kingcups or marshmallows. And my parents had, from the 1920s, these Encyclopaedia Britannica, huge, big volumes. So I got hold of the one that begins with M, and was looking for marshmallows, but I happened to stumble on the article on the planet Mars. It completely blew my mind. And from then on, I was absolutely determined to become an astronomer or an astrophysicist. And people said, well, you'll need mathematics for that, so you'll have to go to Cambridge and study mathematics. Well, I just managed to get into Cambridge and studied mathematics. I enjoyed the course, but I didn't do particularly well. I got second-class honors. But meanwhile, before I went to Cambridge, I'd had 6 months and I'd been incredibly lucky. I went to Canada. And of all luck, one of the greatest happinesses of my life, I got a job as a weather observer in the Canadian Arctic, just inside the Arctic Circle. And before going up to this position, I went to the best bookshop in Edmonton in Alberta, Canada, and got a suitcase full of books, including lots of novels translated into English. And just by chance, a book of short stories translated from the Russian of Pushkin. And up in the Arctic, I read them, and I was so charmed by them. I thought, I'm going to learn Russian. So after I'd done my 3 years at Cambridge, I'd already learned quite a lot of German because I was very keen on Richard Wagner's music in those days, much less so now. And signed up for a year at an interpreter school in Munich, where I learned Russian and German and even a little bit of Italian in the evenings. So that's how I learned Russian. And then I happened to my accommodation in Munich, my room that I was renting, was only 200 yards from the observatory in Munich. So I went along to one or two lectures there and got talking to the professor, and he said I could do a PhD in astrophysics with him. So I did start that, but then the accident happened that completely changed my life. There was a student, Jürgen, I was friendly with, and he invited me to climb the mountain, the Watzmann. I think it's the second highest mountain in Germany, with him. So we set off together by train, and I'd got the copy of the Munich newspaper, the Süddeutsche Zeitung, and in it there was an article that about the only popular science article that Paul Dirac, the great founder, one of the great founders of quantum mechanics, had ever written. It's the only one he ever wrote. It had been in the Scientific American in May 1963, in which he had said various things about quantum mechanics and so forth. And one of the things he did say was that he'd been looking at how to quantize, transform Einstein's wonderful theory of general relativity into quantum mechanics. And he'd come to the conclusion that you would have to radically change the way Einstein's theory of gravity worked. So that Einstein's theory of gravity was, if you imagine what you're looking at now is space-time, time going vertically and space horizontally. And Einstein had introduced this idea that simultaneity is completely relative. So you could imagine cutting it like a loaf of bread in all sorts of ways, in things like that. And this was the great revolution of relativity of simultaneity. And Dirac, having looked at the mathematics of it, said, no, I'm very suspicious about this. I don't think it's right at all, because all this thing is just introducing a whole lot of arbitrary stuff, which is really nothing whatever to do with the universe. That's just what some human being has put into the thing. You must get rid of that. You must restore simultaneity. And he said, on the basis of this argument, I'm inclined to believe that four-dimensional symmetry is not a fundamental feature of the physical world. Well, this was pretty revolutionary for me. Anyway, we got to a nice little hut halfway up the Watzmann, and then it was time to go to bed before we planned the ascent for dawn next morning. Anyway, I woke up with a splitting headache, went out for a call of nature and saw Orion in the sky, beautiful sight. And I said to Jürgen, I'm afraid there's no way I'm going to climb that mountain. I'm just going to go back, take some aspirin and go back to bed. So he did it on his own. And then when I woke up, luckily without the headache, I said, well, if Dirac says he doesn't believe in space-time, what is time? So that was October 1963. And I've been thinking about these things ever since. And I did try to talk to Dirac, but he wasn't having it. He said, go talk to some other crank and not bother me. But I'm still very grateful to him for pushing me in this direction. And
did you get him on the phone?
I spoke to him on the phone. Yes, he answered. This is Mr. Dirac, he said. But I did meet some other very interesting people. I was actually in Cambridge, hoping I could see him, but I did meet the man who was jointly responsible for the creation of the atomic bomb during Otto Frisch, along with Rudolf Peierls. Those were the two refugees from Germany. They'd been nominally interned in Birmingham, and while they were there, I can't remember whether it was Frisch or Peierls, I think it was Frisch, realized Frisch was the nephew of Lisa Meitner and had really understood with her what was going on with fission, which had been discovered. just before this. Um, and between them, they realized that you could make an atomic bomb with far less uranium than had hitherto been realized. Um, so they talked to the physicist who was nominally in charge of them and said, "We think we better write this up and give it to your government." So that's how initially the British government started a project to make an atomic bomb. But then very soon Churchill realized that he should bring in the Americans. So that was how that. But I did have several quite long discussions with Otto Frisch, a very nice man.
Wow. So interesting. You're so good at this storytelling. I absolutely love it. I could just sit here and listen to you tell these stories all day long. Am I right that when you were learning German in Munich, that the teacher in the school was Hitler's main interpreter? Is that a true story?
That is a true story. Well, no, he wasn't my teacher. We had a German teacher who was very good. He was head of the interpreter school. Um, he had been head of the interpreter school before Hitler came to power. He was amazing. He I think at his prime he could understand over 20 languages. And at the notorious Munich conference, which was in the music high school actually where it was held, he was the only one who actually did the interpreting. Of course, there were other interpreters there to make sure he wasn't making things up. But he handled it all, including Czech. At least that's what I was told. There was a nice story about this too. Of course, they needed a map for this discussion, and apparently the Germans hadn't even thought of getting an atlas there before the thing. So somebody was sent to rush around the street next to the music high school to find somebody who got an atlas, which was brought along for the conference.
Wow.
Rather, well, I mean, I suppose this is life. There's full of many very bizarre things, but brutal and terrible things that happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's focus in on Dirac and why he came to the conclusion that this 4D symmetry wasn't fundamental. First off, I'm going to get you to explain what that sentence means, but I think it has something to do with the lines of time or space-time isn't fundamental to the universe. What did he do to arrive at that conclusion? How did that result pop out?
Oh, he just analyzed the form of. So you can represent Einstein's equations in two different ways. One is the way that, well, it wasn't Einstein really. It was one or two. Well, first of all, there was some very sophisticated mathematics done long before Einstein created general relativity. And the actual mathematical equations were by mathematician friends who were much better at the mathematics than he was. It was just Einstein was so determined to get this theory, and he did have one really great idea. The great idea of Einstein was really just basically the same insight that Galileo had, that in a gravitational field, all bodies, whatever their nature and mass, they all have the same acceleration. They fall at the same rate in vacuum. So that was the background to it. But the mathematics is very sophisticated, and it basically starts off by assuming that that space there is a concept of space time which had been introduced by a remarkable German mathematician Hermann Minkowski in 1908, which fused space and time together and made them almost identical, except that there are things called light cones. There is the only structure originally in Minkowski's space time is the structure that represents how light would propagate, and then you could sort of imagine bending it, and well, it would be curved. So basically, then um, Einstein's mathematician friends taught him how to bend this four-dimensional structure, and then how you would describe that with any coordinate system that you like, with great generality, and so that was the way it was found. So, but Dirac went about it in a quite different way, which was in anticipation of doing it, making it into a quantum theory. And that's called the canonical formalism. Well, this goes back to a very brilliant Irish mathematician called Hamilton, who in the 1820s and 1830s did very, very brilliant work. And there's a famous story about him. He developed the notion of quaternions, and finally the structure that occurred to him, and he scratched it on one of the bridges over the Liffey. I don't know whether it's still there. But anyway, Hamilton formulated dynamics, Newtonian dynamics, in a very different way, and that's called Hamiltonian dynamics. Basically, what he did was put position and momentum on an equal footing. With hindsight, I would say that's not really the right way to do it, but there was no question it was very brilliant and beautiful mathematics. So what Dirac did, and that was one of the two, it was through that formalism of Hamilton that one of the two ways that quantum mechanics was discovered. So Dirac wanted to rewrite general relativity in that form. And in the process of doing that, that was when he came to the conclusion that in the form that Einstein and his mathematical friends had formulated general relativity was just introducing a whole lot of redundant structure that you didn't want. So Dirac was getting it down to the absolute bare minimum that you need. And I think he was absolutely spot on. He was saying the way to describe nature is to cut out everything that's not essential. And then when you're left with the essential parts, and if you took away any more, the whole system would collapse and you wouldn't have anything, then you will see the truth. And I think he was absolutely spot on with that. And that's been very much the way I've tried to think about these things. And over the years, I've come to feel how exactly right Dirac was on that. However, unlike me, Dirac did not question what time is. He still was happy to say, yes, there is time. So that's a bit of the background to it.
Brilliant. I studied neuroscience in Trinity College Dublin, and my building that I was in for 4 years was the Hamilton building. So of course, named after the Hamilton that you mentioned. So that story would have been told to us quite a few times throughout my degree. Yes. Super interesting story. And I love this history of science. You're so good and eloquent about the way that you go through each detail. This is so interesting to me.
Well, it is fascinating. I mean, my really big book was the history of dynamics from the word go. So I enjoyed that greatly, yes.
So why do most physicists, or I don't know, is the consensus in physics today that time isn't fundamental, or is the consensus that time exists, but what is the consensus in physics around time, or is there such a thing?
There's certainly plenty of people prepared to question time. I was it became quite well known, there was a workshop in, when was it now? 91, 92 in Spain, in Huelva. There were all sorts of people there, including Stephen Hawking. I've never been photographed so much in my life because the Spanish press and television people got hugely excited with Stephen Hawking being there. It's where Christopher Columbus set off from. And so there was lots of photographs being taken. And at that event, there were about 40 participants, I think. I organized a straw poll. Do you believe in time? And I can't remember precisely the outcome, but I think there was a small majority saying no, they didn't believe time really exists. Others did, and then one or two said don't know. But it was quite funny because the organizers were very pleased with my straw poll, so they leaked it to the Spanish press, and one of the participants, Bryce DeWitt, whom I got to know, he wasn't too pleased when he arrived in Madrid on the Saturday morning and found the result of the straw poll that I'd organized all over the Spanish newspapers, including the way he had voted. So, he did forgive me.
I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Giant Shoulder podcast. If you did, you should check out these ones next. Remember to subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for the support.